No, I can't. I can't at all. Like, I'll stick to writing like that. I can do.
Yeah, yeah. Now writing is something I didn't think that I would enjoy as much as I do. Just
So much fun.
yeah, yeah. So I guess I'll just go ahead and get this shindig started.
Yeah, yeah. Let's knock it out.
So today I've got with me my good friend, long, long time. I'd say what, 20 plus years now.
Yeah, I think I met you when
Yeah,
I was 14, and
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
34 now.
yeah. That's about
Oh
right.
yeah, yeah.
This is Evan Scott, uh, fellow DM and board game enthusiast. Well, pretty much you all played a bunch of different things in high school and stuff growing up.
Yeah, yeah. With the crowd I ran around with, oh Lord, yeah, yeah. I think that was the mutual thing that first like brought us together was like video games, like Final Fantasy and stuff like that.
Oh
It's
yeah.
kind of general RPGs, and then it just kind of like tapered out into different directions.
Mm-hmm.
As that went on, found out we all like board games, and then I decided to try D&D. I think my first D&D experience was like 15, and it was our friend Brett Bailey.
Oh yeah.
He had gotten a copy of the core rulebook for Star Wars, and it was me, him, and Dustin, and we sat in his room one day, and Brett had just come up with this little one shot,
Yeah.
and it was, oh man, like, it was so like, I felt like, because I had heard about D&D for years, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you grow up the age we are growing up, you hear it's like the satanic panic and how Dungeons
Yeah.
and Dragons is gonna like warp your brain and you're gonna be worshiping the devil. But like, I mean, in
Exactly.
Star Wars is Star Wars, whatever.
Right.
But it was so like engaging, like, and it's like a 15-year-old writing it, right? So it's not like it was particularly good or anything, but it doesn't
Fun.
have to be either. It doesn't have to be either. Like,
Yeah.
it was just amazing,
Yeah.
and I was immediately hooked. Like, and it would be the tiniest things that would like really engage me. Like, I don't remember anything about the session other than like we were in this tunnel and there was some like writing on the wall, and it was like in a language we didn't know or something like that. And I was just immediately like I have to know what it is or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's funny because my D&D career is actually pretty sporadic. Like,
Off and
um,
on through the years.
yeah, absolutely. And it's like, so I think I've played with 5 different DMs, and um, all of them, and it's a nice little window into seeing like how differently people can play,
Yeah.
or how they run a session or whatever. And it's a good way to realize that there's no one right way to do it, right?
Yeah. True.
And because I mean, I'm not gonna bother you with like just regaling every DM I played with, but like,
No, it's all good,
so
man. This is just kind of like an
yeah,
open forum sort of thing. So
yeah, because
it's
some of them were good, and then some of them were just like goofy. Like, because I remember, and I won't name names, right?
yeah.
But
Got you.
I remember one I played with. We were playing in geometry class, and or like during third period,
I
right?
think I
Which was
know
in
this
this.
story.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember who all was there. Dustin might have been. I don't
I
know,
think Dustin was. If
but I
it's the one
remember.
I'm thinking about.
What I remember specifically though was like I started off like on the roof of a house, and I asked my D, and there was like goblins
Yeah.
attacking or whatever. And I asked the DM, like, "Why am I on the roof of a house?" And he was like, "You just are. Just go." I said, "All right." And then I jumped off the house to get on the ground so I could attack these goblins. And he's like, "Do an acrobatics roll." And I'm like, it was like crit fail or something. And he's like, and he was like so relentless, like unrelenting. He was just like, "Okay, you immediately like break both of your legs."
Oh,
And then like goblins, I got one turn before I died because I was also level 1. I had like
oh
maybe
yeah.
maybe like 6 hit points or
Yeah.
something. But I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go back to reading my book because I was dead like immediately. Um, but yeah, I've played some with some really good DMs too, and but I knew like even after like Brett's first game, was like, okay, no, I want a DM. Like, playing is fine. Like, I don't mind being a character. Like, that's really fun. But like, no, like I want to be the storyteller, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
so like after I'd played with Brett, I had he lent me I think he lent me the rule book, so I could kind of get a sense of how it worked and everything. And then I just immediately started sketching out like my own plot for like a Star Wars session.
Yeah.
And like I don't remember the bones of it at all, but like it was just so fun, just kind of like crafting like where I thought this plot would go and everything. But then like the first time I actually really DM'd though was 2008, and some friends, they really wanted to play D&D, but they wanted to play like this World of Warcraft
Yeah.
variant of it. But it was still based on like
The
third and a half edition.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was still based on that. But I came up with a general plot and this section. But it's funny. I might be knocking out a whole bunch of your questions already.
No, bro. Go ahead. No, this is great.
Yeah. But one thing that was funny to me starting out was, and I don't know if you reacted the same way when you started, is like you felt like this real big compulsion to anticipate everything.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Just trying to read everyone's body language and everything. It's like, what's he about to do? Like,
well, I mean, even in the sense of before the session even starts.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like I remember, it's in one of those notebooks up there. I have a set of notebooks up there of different things, and one of them is just notes from like the first. We never played this particular one, but it was just notes from this session we were going to run. Like it was these guys, they were exploring like a orc, a horde like outpost.
Yeah.
And I had like every room in the outpost, and like I had described it in excruciating detail. I'd written all this dialogue for all the NPCs and everything, and it was like 30 pages. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, and it was just like I mean, it was super fun, but it was so exhausting too. Like, it's something completely unsustainable.
Yeah,
and that's just like first DM jitters, right? Because like once you actually do it, then it's just like you trust your own brain a little more, and it's like that you can deal with this situation or that situation.
It's more like laying out dominoes, isn't it? Just
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, and I don't know it. And then you realize like, because what that basically is, that's just like railroading, because like you're just expecting them to follow along this set path or whatever. And then when you play, you realize it's way more fun to not do that,
right?
And just kind of let them kind of guide the stream of the plot or whatever. But yeah, it's just but even then, like a lot of my D&D like campaign careers or whatever just last like barely more than like 2 or 3 sessions. Like all those first ones, it was just like 2 or 3 at the most. And then but the first time the next time I got to DM was like the one I actually got to do it, right? Like it was actually an extended campaign. I think we went 17 or 18 before I want to call it a hiatus, but I haven't even talked to those guys in like 6-7 months or whatever. So that campaign's probably over, which is sad because, there was a lot of character building and world building and development, all that stuff in there. But it's just the way it is with Dungeons and Dragons.
It really is. Getting people together and everyone, having to, because life happens. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like that group, one of them was a nurse, and like she was having to work out of town in like Akron and Columbus, wherever. And for all I know, she's like just moved, because I think it's something she was talking about with her husband. And another one, he got really busy at his company. Like he had been promoted to like above a supervisor position, and like it just like it commanded all of his time.
Yeah.
And so I assume those guys are still like really busy with all that.
Yeah.
But life just It's demanding.
It is. It can be very demanding at times. Like, and in the moments that we all get together and stuff, it's something that I'm gonna make it good. Because
Absolutely.
it may be
Yeah.
months before we can all get together again.
Yeah. And
And
yeah, and it's got to be, and you want to make it, memorable, like
yeah,
magical, even if you want to
right,
use such a phrase.
yeah.
Um,
But you were there in that session with the ancient black dragon.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, you all were level 7, and I was like, this might kill them.
you're right.
Might kill them. But
Yeah, and I remember that too, and like, and it's one of those things that makes you feel bad because we were just talking about life getting in the way, and I've had to miss, like, I don't even know how many good sessions you guys have played, but I only made it to that one, and it makes me feel bad. But
no, no, no.
uh,
It's just it's hard to get together, man. It's
yeah,
it's not a
yeah.
big deal. Like you're always welcome at my table
Yeah.
anytime you can show up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'll
Thank
work
you.
you in. We'll
But it
figure it
is one of
out.
those. It is one of those things too. Like, I think because Brett sits at your table too,
Mhm.
and I think you guys got him to, like, Discord in or whatever,
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I
Because I've done both. I just want to see how you feel about it first.
I think that it becomes more difficult to manage as far as their experience via Discord, and versus because it's a different atmosphere and everything whenever everyone's together. But I feel like it takes away from it for the person that's just viewing. But
Yeah,
and but the other thing is that you're also having to juggle the sound and because I had the one mic set up in here and Brett was just getting a plethora of sounds and echoes and everything coming through that one mic. I was like,
yeah,
he's like, ah. So I talked to him afterward. I was like, "What do you think?" He's like, it's a little echoey, but it's fine.
yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah. I
during
had
that time,
a
COVID was surging.
You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I had, and now that you mentioned COVID,
yeah,
I had to do that. I had to do that once. Like, one of my players, he caught COVID, and so, and like, it was one of those things, like, we were in a rhythm, like we were
mhm,
playing every week, and we didn't want to like skip, right? We didn't want,
right.
even though he had caught COVID, like, we didn't want him
Miss out.
to yeah, or so. But what we did was, he missed one session because he didn't know where he was.
Yeah, yeah,
The COVID had him that bad. But so we played a session without him. But then the next one, he was feeling well enough to play, but we needed to. He's like, I can't go. Like, I'm still contagious or
right.
whatever.
Yeah,
And so he Discorded in. Him and his girlfriend did, and and we had a session, and it was perfectly fine and everything. But, like, we all admitted afterwards, is like it was like a necessary evil, but also, like, it was way preferable just do it IRL,
yeah,
because there's an energy that can only happen when everyone's in the room together.
exactly.
Um, and you just can't get that through Discord, which makes me, because I've thought about doing that before, like, because it's a lot easier to get people together when they don't have to leave their house and drive
Oh yeah, for sure.
X amount of time.
Yeah,
But it's made me really wary to, like, do it just like an online game, because, like,
yeah,
I don't feel like the magic will be the same,
yeah.
you know.
I've only had one VTT experience, and it was with one of my coworkers at work. She was actually hosting her first time DMing, but
Hmm.
she was real familiar with the Roll20 interface and everything. I, however, was not.
Yeah, I've looked at it before,
Yeah.
but, like, it's like,
So I had to go in there and try to figure everything out, how
yeah,
to put my character on the board, and navigate the menus and everything. And but it was fun because I think in that particular way, knowing that everyone else was participating in the same way, I was able to let that other part of me go and treat it more as if you're playing. If you're on World of Warcraft and you're talking with your friends over Discord, it was something like that. You know,
oh, okay, yeah.
yeah, but
That's an interesting way to examine it.
yeah,
But I think for someone like you, like, who's a very visual person, like, you have all your minis and set pieces and everything. I bet that made it especially difficult for you.
it did.
Like,
It did.
yeah,
Because
like,
I wanted to. to be able to immerse myself. And I was really nervous. I was playing with people I didn't, other than, her.
Yeah.
I didn't really know the rest of everybody, and everyone was super nice, and it was a great experience overall.
Yeah.
I just, for me, if I can, as I like being a DM, and because just as well as I do, being able to be a DM, you get to play anything you want. If you want to be a lich, you can be a lich. You
Exactly.
know, and I don't know. I mean, uh, some of my other friends from work and stuff, Jonathan Everman, who I've had on the podcast there a couple weekends ago. Uh, I played in some of his games, but they were all in person. And he had the minis and set pieces and stuff. But he had been playing D&D for like 20 years, and I was like, well, I want to see what this guy's all about.
Yeah.
And he just blew me away, and I was like, how do you keep track of all this? It's like, this is something I've just gotten accustomed to. And
Yeah, that's definitely true.
yeah,
Like, because like when I ran a game, like I started out like that. Like I have folders on my computer that have like different things like NPCs I want to remember,
same.
cultural things, religions,
Hmm.
plot elements or whatever. And all that's still there, and I still kind of throw it in there from time to time when
Yeah,
when relevant stuff came up. But like eventually got to the point where it was just all up in my head,
yeah,
and it was just like kind of on recall.
yeah.
Um, because like man, your brain is a muscle. Because like yeah, starting out like it's so easy to forget everything, but you do it enough times, like it's just kind of automatic
Right.
how it
Yeah.
stays in there.
Uh-huh. It's like driving a stick shift or something.
Uh,
After you drove one for a while, you don't even think about it anymore. You just
Exactly,
know.
exactly. Uh,
Yeah, man. Is there any source books or anything coming up that you're really looking forward to, or have you had something that on your mind that you've always wanted to run but never quite got the chance to do?
no, because uh, like that. Let me phrase it this way. Maybe if there was some certain like spells or something in them that were like interesting, but like in terms of content, like usually I much prefer to just like build my own like campaign. Like I only take from source books like what I have to.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of like plots or anything, I don't like modules or
Mm.
anything like that. Curse of Strahd, because like
Well,
one of the yeah, I have ran one module. It was Tomb of Annihilation,
ooh.
and it like yeah, it's fine, but like it also sort of has like sort of a structure to it that's
Uh-huh.
like it doesn't like really jive with me.
Yeah,
But what were
yeah.
you about to say about Curse of Strahd?
Well, I was gonna say I did what we called a bro squad versus Strahd.
Oh,
I wanted to
nice.
do it like a one shot just to kind of see how everyone would like it, and I think it was just Dustin, Stamper, and Corey.
Yeah.
And I read that book as written to them, and I really thought that they were just going to hate me for just going because it is the module is so brutal anyway. Because Strahd
Yeah.
has all these, you know, cosmetic effects they could just innately do and everything,
Right.
and I essentially just made them just hate the fact that I was just going through it and not really leading astray from anything, but
Hmm.
just not really. It felt like I wasn't giving them enough opportunities to just explore the area. Like
Yeah.
I put them in a box and there they were. This is what
Yeah.
they were going to experience, and I was like,
Th-
I really
That's
didn't
what you get
like
to
it.
work with.
Yeah, yeah,
I
but
do think, yeah, I do think I will rephrase like if you're like a beginner DM, and this seems very pretentious of me to say because
power through it.
I still consider myself really a beginner DM. But if you're someone who's like kind of anxious about kind of the improvisational element of the game, yeah, I could see the value in modules.
Hmm.
And like because it just kind of it has that path set for you.
Yeah,
But like that kind of thing is like to me that's like being in a band and doing a cover song. Like it's just like
that's a
it's
good analogy. That's a
like
good
it's
way to
just
put
like
it.
yeah, that's not like super engaging to me. Like I like to build the world, and I like to set the plot pieces and everything, because that's what's exciting to me. Like I've played games before
Hmm.
where like um, one of my players like super like experienced Dungeons and Dragons player, and we talking or like we'll be going through a session or whatever, and he'll say like the elves don't behave this way because in Faerun they're like this, and I said, well, we're not in Faerun, like they're not even black elves and
Right.
dark elves in my setting or whatever,
Hmm.
because I had some like narrative reason for for me, like I'm not super into dragons. Like they're cool, but I feel like they're kind of like overrated or
Hmm.
whatever. So
Yeah.
like in my setting, like they don't exist. Like they're all dead or whatever. Um, but because I like to make those decisions
Yeah.
and everything. So that's like what's appealing to me. But at the same time, uh, I can get a lot of interesting inspiration from like say a monster manual. So like if there was a cool monster manual, and I don't even need to read the stat blocks or anything. If I'll just see a cool picture of a particular monster that I wasn't thinking about, it's like okay, that I can use for this or that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like specific source books that are on the way or anything, no, no, nothing's really coming
Nothing.
to
Nothing's
mind.
really standing
Yeah,
out.
I mean, what about you? Like, do you have any that are like on the
I've
way that
I've
are?
got one. Well, I just recently got the Rise of the Drow. I've got that one, but it's not. It's third party. It's not official content, but it's a 300 and some odd page PDF that has just got. You could sit and play that for the rest of your life. It
Yeah,
takes you all the way from 1 to 20, and it is just a ridiculous amount of content. But Dragonlance is the one that I'm really looking forward to. I'm all about, you know, the I've been reading the books and everything, and I just think the
yeah, like
whole
those
yeah.
like Hickman and Weiss books or
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Yeah.
or the Mercedes Lackey, whoever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, I haven't read any of them, but like, yeah, they're ridiculously popular.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's kind of I don't necessarily would want to do it as a module, but to draw inspiration from it as far as being able to accompany what the book offers and kind of incorporating it some into like our my homebrew. Like I've got two homebrew campaigns going on, but we haven't played Curse of Strahd in probably since beginning of summer. Probably was the
oh
last time.
wow,
Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely on the back burner, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun, but they're in a spot where they're not quite powerful enough to just go into Castle Ravenloft yet,
Hmm.
but they also don't have all the necessary items and the plot points engaged to where they can actually be able to do much about it at this point. So they just made it to the town of Vallaki, which is kind of like where the central hub and everything kind of branches out from there as far as like the story and everything really ramping up. So
So is Dragonlance like your favorite like D&D setting?
I, as far as the source material and stuff that I managed to get my hands on, well, as far as books anyway, yes, I
Yeah.
really, it's about a war and everything. I really like those elements and everything. As far as like grand scale, I would love to have my table just laid out and two big armies and everything with dragons and everything. But you know, I digress. That would cost you a fortune in minis alone, not
Yeah, like
including.
have you heard of Warhammer?
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. I was like, it almost feels that way. And
Yeah.
I've looked into Warhammer as well, and that is an entirely different animal on its own.
Right. I feel like that'd be up your alley though, since you like painting minis
Yeah.
and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's that's an expensive hobby. I remember one time I was in a game shop in Columbus, Ohio, and there was there were like it's one cool thing about bigger cities. Like you walk into a game shop and they don't have the problems that us living rurally have. Like you can go into a game shop and you see all these ads for
Yeah.
D&D groups and everything. But I remember seeing one, like this dude, he was like selling his Warhammer, like one of his Warhammer armies. Like it's like starter army, orcs or whatever, and it was like $200 or
Yeah.
whatever. I was like, oh my god, that kind of buy-in is
Yeah.
like that's scary.
And
Like that's one of the great things about D&D. It's like you spend $20 on a book, have some notebook paper, you can
that's
go.
it. Yeah, that's it. You
Yeah,
can use theater of the mind,
yeah,
and you don't have to have minis or anything like that. If you can half-ass draw out a grid or something, if you wanted to do it that way. But
yeah,
you know, realistically, I will allow my players if I can conceivably seeing their character try something or something like that. But okay, well, yeah, you can open the door or whatever. It's locked.
yeah,
To kind of leave it to them to kind of judge how everything goes. Uh, I've done that a couple times, but I've always had like, for instance, and you've seen two or three of my sets that I brought out that night, but it was the times that were in between. There was just a grid, and then whenever something big was coming up, I'd set out all the set pieces and the minis and everything.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny because like I'm a very lazy DM when it comes to that side of it. Maybe if I was able to kind of like spread my creative energy more evenly, I could do that. But like I could never like get into like making the sets and everything. And like I've seen yours and like they're amazing, and I really like them. I was like, man, I couldn't do this.
I mean,
you know,
the good thing about it too is that we don't play that often. It gives me
right?
time in between. It's like, man, I can really throw this together, and I've got these three sitting behind me right now that
Yeah.
are just waiting to go. But I couldn't do that every week. There's a
Yeah.
sacrifice that has to be made in between.
Yeah. I guess that was a big element of it because I was playing every week,
Yeah.
and I mean I know people like I worked with this guy. He was playing like 3 times a week, and I think he was DMing 2 of those groups, and I'm like I think one was a homebrew, the other was like a module, whatever it was, and the third one was just one he played in. But I was like, I have no idea how you do this, like because I just do one game a week, and that like takes every bit of energy I got to do.
Same.
It's just exhausting. I mean, it's amazing, but it's exhausting.
It is really. You can spend a lot of time doing it, and you could really, if you had the opportunity to sit down and monetize any of it, you could make it into a full-time job,
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah, it's not even up for debate.
Yeah.
Um,
But I had interviewed Jake Smith from Time Warp there on Friday, and
Okay.
he's the guy that hosts all the Pug games throughout the week. And he holds a game on Friday, Saturday, and Monday. And each of these are going for like 4 to 6 hours.
yeah,
And I asked him, I was like, how do you do this? He's like, just after a while, you just kind of get accustomed to it. And,
Yeah.
he said they'll have like 2 or 3 tables going at a time. And he pretty much spends the week writing out the story and everything what the players are going to encounter. But here's the thing, he doesn't turn anyone down from coming in. So just 2 or 3 people extra could walk in with characters ready to go, and he's got to adjust everything on the fly. And I was like,
Yeah.
that is such an interesting skill set to have.
yeah. That is really cool, and that's the right word for it. It is a skill set, and it is something you train at.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's some people who might be more naturally accustomed to like being able to take a job like that on, and some aren't. But like, man, it is something that you have to work at and get better at.
Oh, for sure.
But no, I guess. So the game I played with you, like, do you have like, not like just the map of the dungeon or anything? Like, do you have like a world map?
I do actually.
Yeah, because I was gonna say like that is the most like in terms of like visual creativity. That's like the most visually creative thing I did in my settings. Like I did have a world map.
Yeah. I did
had
that with Incarnate. I think's the site that I used. To make the map.
I think
It's
because the way I did it was I knew roughly, but I'm not an artistic person at all. I knew
Same.
roughly what I wanted to make it look like. And Incarnate might be the one I used because I googled different kind of map generators on Google, and I had a rough idea. And I'd also watched videos on like how fantasy authors typically make their maps anyway. So I had a kind of feeling for the geography and everything, and how to make it not look like shit, as
Right.
it were.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like one trick is like take the coast of a country you already know. Like let's say you take Italy,
Hmm.
and then you just kind of zoom in on this portion of it,
Yeah.
and then just make that your map.
Yeah.
Like no one's gonna know that's
Exactly. Yeah.
the toe of Italy or whatever.
Oh yeah.
But uh, what I did was like I roughly kind of sketched out basically what it'd be like. Then I went on Incarnate, and then I kind of made it look less shitty. And
Yeah.
then once I had it kind of in a space that I liked, I then just drew it out. Because the problem I had, if it's Incarnate, I'm thinking of on the free version, I didn't feel like paying for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the free one, you couldn't. There weren't enough like kind of tiles or whatever to do everything you wanted, like
Yeah.
put buildings or rivers or
Yeah.
whatever. So I just like, okay, this is basically the shape I want. I'll
Yeah.
draw it now, and then put everything I actually want into it,
Right.
like a graveyard of minotaurs or whatever. Um,
And
but
for me,
yeah,
it was I paid for the premium version of it, and it's just a crazy amount of content that they've got on there that you could put in. Like
yeah, like
you could
because I've
literally
seen
do the world map, or you could do like a battle map. I mean, you could create
yeah.
every bit of that, and I was like, man, that'd be pretty cool because I've considered putting a TV in my table. It would most certainly make my life a little bit
I,
easier.
I played with a guy who did that, and
Yeah.
he had it, and I can't remember what he used, but yeah, it was all his. He had his world map, and it was all
Mhm.
hex tiles or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, he had it on his TV, and I thought though like that was really effective. Like not gonna lie, it was really cool to see that.
Yeah.
Um, where when I DM'd, we didn't have it. If we had a TV available like that, I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, like if you can if you can get one,
Oh yeah.
you'll like it. You'll
Yeah.
like it.
I may
Let's
do
put
it.
that way.
I may do it. Carla may not be too happy that I'm putting it on the kitchen table, but you know, sacrifices must be made.
My husband's turning into a dweeb.
Yeah. She's done that for a long time.
Good point.
It was her fault. She's the one that married me, so
Yeah,
she knew what she's getting into.
exactly.
So, how whenever you're planning to host a session or anything, like how do you go about setting that up? Do you have any particular? Do you have a method to the madness, so to speak?
I guess so. God, how do you answer that question? So, so to me, it's sort of like controlling an avalanche, because once it's started,
Hmm.
I guess a better way to answer your question is like, how did I get started?
Yeah.
Because everything that came after is sort of like, okay, they came to this point. Next session, what is happening to get them to this point?
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
it can probably vary week to week then.
yeah, absolutely. It's not like it was, but it was me. It was in the middle of a campaign. It was sort of like, how are they dealing with the fallout of what they just did or
Yeah.
whatever. But in terms of planning, how it all got set up is God, this is gonna be a long answer.
Go for it. Go for it.
So I went in knowing I wanted to create the whole world myself. I didn't want Elminster to be in there or whatever.
Yeah.
Or whoever. But so I basically had the map, and the map I wanted to be the way it was for plot reasons. And then basically what I did was I came up with like kind of the overarching plot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very simple. It was just, this villain wants to do this, it's basically, and like, how does that goose lay the eggs of these plots, other plots? And that funneled into what I was going to directly, because that's something that's entertaining to me, is having like, your big bad operating in the background.
Yeah.
How does that feed into the villain they're directly dealing with that session? And so that became its own internal plot, and there's the little mysterious nuggets that were planned in there. And I didn't. I was I was wary about railroading. So basically, what I did was for that first session, I came up with like 3 separate sort of plots for them to deal with. Like, okay, they can investigate this graveyard for this, then go investigate this forest for this, and whatever.
Yeah.
And then I sketched out a couple of NPCs that I thought they would have to deal with. Like a banker, a merchant, a blacksmith, whatever.
Yeah.
And of course, this feeds into uh, the how your players are gonna shit all over any of your plans.
I know
Uh,
that all too well.
so, like I said, like I sketched out like 6 very typical NPCs you would see in a town, and then the first thing one of my players says when they was like, "Where's the local taxidermist?" I was like, "Okay, he's over here."
Yeah, I wasn't planning on that one, but here we go.
Yeah,
Here we are.
exactly. Uh, but then so once that was sketched out, then I just kind of came up with some town names, and and then I just kind of plopped them in there. Like getting started is like was the hardest part for me. It was like I because I don't like to tell the players what they're doing, like in the sense of like you're all here. Because I played one session with a guy. He just said you're here for this festival because of this or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't want to do that. I just like, but I guess I should have because it would have made my life a little easier. It's like you guys are adventurers and you wanted to do this. But what I tried to do at the beginning of the campaign was I tried to get each of them to like decide on some of their own backstory or have a goal what they wanted.
Yeah.
They because like that's the essence of like good character, right? Is like you have to have a person who wants something, and what is in the way of that.
Right.
One guy, he just like, and it's no shade on any players, but some of them just like they don't think that way. Like they just want to kill shit or whatever, and that's perfectly fine. So I had one guy, my paladin, he was just like, I just want to get stronger because that was basically what he wanted, but we talked it out a little, and he wanted to get stronger to earn his family's throne or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had my warlock. He just like and this is another thing that really helps inform, because this is where I get a lot of my ideas. Is just from shit they do.
Yeah.
Is one of my players, he was a warlock, and he said, I want to be secretly evil. And I feel like every campaign everywhere has that one player that wants to be secretly evil, and he wanted to be secretly evil, and he wanted to become like a god of evil.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, that's a good idea.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what can I do with that? What can I do with that?" And then I thought in my head, because another thing I really like to do. I know I'm dancing around your question a lot.
No, you're good. No.
Another thing I really like to do is kind of fuck with my players. He's saying, okay, he's like, I want to be a god of evil, and I was like, okay, but here's what I'll do. You already are, but you just don't know it yet, or whatever. And then that informed like a whole plot. All of a sudden, then I had secret agent dudes or whatever who were trying to kill him. He didn't know why, and all this stuff, and just like informed like, and then like there was another god who was just constantly giving him shit or whatever, and talking in riddles to him and stuff, and it just like informed so much plot, just him saying that one thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, it settled it up. And another thing, now we're just talking about like design philosophy, DM philosophies now.
Good.
But I've because I don't know if you get on Reddit a lot or anything like that. But
I do. Yeah.
Are you sub to DM Academy? Is that what it's called? I think it's what it's called.
I might be.
Yeah, it's let me check. I think that's what it's called. It's a pretty cool subreddit where, yeah, DM Academy.
Okay.
It's a pretty cool subreddit where like people just either they throw out certain types of questions like problem players or whatever, but also just sort of like design questions like how do I come up with a situation for whatever, and
oh, I am sub to him. Yeah.
And one thing, and they get a lot of noob type questions, and one of them was, um, how like how big do you make your world at the start or whatever? And I remember the consensus being like, just start with a town, and then when they leave it, go outside of that, and then like build on top of it as you have to. My philosophy was the exact opposite. My attitude was make the world, and it's not like you have to populate every single
Yeah.
acre of it or anything like
Right.
that, but have a world, because as you're doing that, I don't know if it was like this for you when you were making your map, but like as you're making the world and making this coastline, the ideas just hit you.
Yeah, they pop. They really do. And
Yeah.
it was more like as you're laying it out, you can see it's like, well, this country owns this, and their wealth is based
Yes.
on this, and they have
Yeah.
this awesome fleet of ships and everything.
Yes, like
Uh,
all of a sudden the cultures start
yeah.
creating themselves, or
Hmm.
there's this ruined castle because a lich lives there or whatever.
Right.
And and to me that's another very important element of like sort of the immersion of the game, because I've played sessions, and like the vibe I get immediately is like, okay, this town is the only thing that exists in this world, because they never talk about anything outside of it.
Hmm.
Like we could have this conversation, we can mention something like some wildfire that's happening in California right now,
Right.
so I inject those types of things into my kind of world. Like you'll have NPCs, they'll be talking about this really fine wine, and it came from Telemere, which is 2 provinces away or something like that.
Yeah.
Just adding those little nuggets helps a lot. So that was, to me, the setup, getting everything set up was like the big chunk of the work. So having the map, and I don't even give a shit, but like just giving the regions names,
Yeah.
and then just having something to refer to. It doesn't have to mean anything, but just
Right.
that you can throw that kind of thing in dialogue. It really just kind of adds a little extra nugget to it.
Yeah.
But then, and so in terms of like setting up, that's like a lot of it's just like setup and having an idea of where the plot's going to go, and just now then it became a point of like as sessions went on, is like, okay, I started planning much less and less,
Yeah.
because
The players
uh,
know they're driving towards a goal that you've kind of helped them along to kind of get them to realize, something like
well,
that, or is it
yeah,
more?
well there's that, but what I also mean is that it kind of becomes pointless, because they're gonna nuke whatever idea you had.
Yeah.
So instead of like I said at the beginning, I had like 3 different plots set up and whatever, and I let them do it. But then, and it was a little more planned out. But then, like as it went on, it's like I would have like a 5 sentence idea, because what would typically happen is like, okay, they start here. Let's say I planned for the week that they were going to go from here to here. They might get to here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the stuff that happened here, it doesn't account for any of this. So, because I remember one specific thing is in our first session, because I love foreshadowing, and I love like plot consequences,
Yeah.
and I love taking advantage of vices my players have. So my one of my players, my bard, in our first session, she was immediately like, "Where's the bank at?" And
Yeah.
she wanted to control all the money or whatever, and said, "Okay, she has a problem with avarice or whatever. She's like really greedy, so I was gonna fuck with her with that." So
Yeah.
I also had a fortune teller and like a tavern or whatever, and what I was just setting up future plot points that I would get to eventually. And one of them, when she had her cards read or whatever, she said she saw a steaming pile of gold in front of her. Well, that kind of gives it away, but like
Yeah.
it was a pile of gold in front of her, and it looked like it was like shimmering, like it was steaming. And what I was setting up basically is that they were going to meet a hag later that was going to like curse her, and she was just going to like shit gold.
Yeah.
That was the whole
There
that
we
was the
go.
whole gag.
Yeah.
And but that's something we didn't get to for like 12, 13 sessions or whatever. And then my brain at the time was like, oh, we'll probably get to this in like 3 weeks or something. No,
Yeah.
it took like 4 months. Um, but so it got to the point where like and like you were saying, like you do have to sort of adapt on the fly, and plot ideas come to you, you know. But I love the idea of like player consequence and everything. So that plays a lot into how I kind of create my session. So, for instance, another instance was one of the first bosses that they fought was a phase spider. You know, it was just like this level 3 creature or whatever. But I kind of beefed them up because I
Yeah.
liked the creature a lot. And after they killed it, they the bard again. She wanted to steal a bunch of like the spider venom or whatever, and just like sell it later. And so they take a bunch of this venom and they sell it to this merchant. And my world had an active drug trade anyway, so our merchant was like, "Oh, this is like," and she's like trying to play it cool at first. You know how like
Oh yeah.
they do. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like I can do something with this. You know, it's like I'll give you 5 gold pieces for it when it's like really awesome shit. Um, Eventually, so they sold her a whole bunch of like phase spider venom or whatever, and then she like just dips out of town the next day.
Yeah.
And then something I had no plans for or anything like that. Then all of a sudden, okay, that's a plot idea. So then the next town they were going to go to, what would have happened was we never got that far. We went on hiatus before we got to the point, but um, what was going to happen was that merchant went to another town, decided to become like a criminal crime boss or whatever. And what she had done is like got an alchemist and kind of made potions out of the phase spider venom and made people drink it so that they could phase through like walls of banks or whatever and steal all their gold and shit.
That is an awesome idea.
Yeah, and what was going to be fun about it is the alchemist would like she got an alchemist on the cheap, right? So
Yeah.
when these guys drink the phase spider venom, like just think of like I don't know, like what if Spider-Man or whatever, like so instead of just getting phase shifting abilities, all of a sudden like their heads turn into spiders or whatever. So it's just gonna be a lot of cool body horror monsters that are gonna have to fight like a spider, like a dude with arms, but he's got spider legs coming out of it too, or whatever. So I wanted the players to have that feeling that the stuff they were doing was informing other shit that was happening in the world. As opposed to things just happening and they react to it. So that also informed a lot of the way I plan things. But again, back to what I was saying earlier, it kind of in a lot of ways it sort of started becoming useless to like plan my own things beforehand because they would just come up with some, and usually usually something they did gave me a better idea than what I already had in mind. But in terms of other setup stuff, it was just mostly like I had a character. He was a warforged, and like his goal was he needed to find his suit of armor, and that was it. And he didn't really remember anything. So I just came up with a big backstory for him. And what I was doing, another thing is, I hate resting because it's like it seems like such a necessary evil. It's like, okay, I gotta do this to get hit points back. It's like that to me, that's boring because nothing happens. So what I decided to do was like every time they rested, or almost every time they rested, I would have like my Warforged player, part of his brain would sort of like find a memory nugget or whatever, and he would have a memory or a dream of like something that would inform the plot or whatever, give an idea of how old he was or whatever. But it was a lot of stuff like that. In terms of, so my last bit, the way I sort of planned out everything is like sort of like 3 stages. It'd be like general plot shit, which we kind of went over, and just like sort of character stuff I kind of wanted to get into the nuggets of. And the last one is combat. Combat is easily what I spent the least amount of time on. Because like I'm not a big, like I like combat, but to me it's like absolutely the least interesting part of Dungeons and Dragons.
It can be, and it can get stale real quick if you're not able to. I don't know how to really word this. It's like you have to, especially if it's going to be a large encounter, like with you all fighting the Black Dragon, or the encounter with a Lich before that I had absolutely zero intention on anyone fighting at all. It's like, oh, they're going to try to run. No, They're not.
They never run.
They
They never
never
run.
run. They never run. So anyone listening to this right now, your characters will never run. Never. Ever.
I'll say that with one caveat. One time I did. If you can give them a more tantalizing out,
Yeah.
they will go for it.
Oh, okay.
I remember this one time. So my again, like I said, my warlock player got COVID, right?
Mhm.
And he had to be out for the session. So it's like, okay, how am I gonna? And this is like 2 days before the session. I'm like, okay, how am I gonna not have him there or whatever? So I decided to do was again active drug trade and my setting. I can't remember the exact setup, but they had these mushrooms, and he just ate one because he knew they were like drug mushrooms or whatever, and he
Yeah.
had this trip in a previous session. But when I decided, okay, he's not going to be there. Okay, he overdosed. He didn't know it. So he has he ODs, and then they take him to like a druid or whatever,
Mm.
and the druid's like, wait, he ate the whole thing. He was
Yeah.
only supposed to eat part of it or whatever. And so what they in it was like a dream, like I called it a dream mushroom. I had like a made up word for it. I can't remember what it is
Yeah.
now. But anyway, what they had to do, what the whole session was, is they had to go inside of his dream to like save him or whatever. And so it was just a whole session inside of his dream. And at the end, like what their goal was is they had to put a diamond in his mouth, and in the dream logic that was going to wake him up. So they get to this room, and there's like these 5 statues around, and they all come to life, and I gave them like a ridiculous amount of hit points.
Yeah.
And they're all trying to kill him. And like you inform them like, oh, they attack, and it's like, oh, that hurt it, but like not much. And immediately it's like, no, let's just wake him up and get out of here.
Yeah.
So that like kind of incentivized them to like, okay, fuck all these guys, let's just wake him up
Yeah.
and plus I was kind of doing an Inception thing. The whole dream was collapsing around them, like
Yeah.
terrain was coming up and everything. But and then it turns out like those 5 statues were just like fingers of a god anyway. But
Yeah. That's neat
but
concept.
that was a good way to like get them to ignore the fight and just kind of use it as a means of like of pressure to them
Yeah.
to get to him and get the hell out of the situation.
Yeah.
But it's extremely hard to do. Like, so the way I would phrase it is 99 times out of 100 they won't run.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's certain times that I will use a big bad to kind of help the plot along or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah.
The one big mistake that I had that I'm sure you're probably aware of is I had brought my queen of the succubi out, and she's holding the wand of Orcus.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that Brett, being the sneaky bastard that he is, I forget what it was. It was either suggestion or command or something, and I fail the roll. So
Yep.
she's hands over this artifact of world-ending domination. Me being a fairly new DM at the time too, so I could have just
Yeah.
said no, fuck you. It ain't gonna work like that. But they end up with this artifact. So Brett's like, I don't want this thing, so he throws it to the lawful good paladin. As soon as he touches it, dies instantly. That was Corey's character. I was like, well, this is gonna have to be interesting.
It's a great start.
Yeah.
But that raises an interesting question. You as a DM, will you fudge your dice rolls any?
I have never
Okay.
never fudged a dice roll in the instance of plot.
Yeah.
I have been in a position where a TPK or something like that is coming up, and I will, instead of, like, if I do succeed on a dice roll, for instance, with the Black Dragon,
Mhm.
I knew that I couldn't just spray a font of acid onto Derek's wizard and him live through it. So
What?
I picked the 2 tankiest people and did that.
Nice.
Did it at them, just that way, so that, they're kind of on the fence about whether or not they want to attack this thing, but kind of giving some levity to, it's like, well, if that would have hit me, I would have been fucking dead right
Yeah.
now. But then again, before that, I'm sure you've read a Lich's stat block and everything. They have power word kill. Anyone
Yep, they
with
sure do.
with less than 100, I'm sitting there. I'm half a bottle into my Buffalo Trace at this point. I'm looking around the room. It's like, who am I going to kill? I chose not to because
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really. I don't mind if like a player has to. I would rather let the dice do it versus just a skill like it. Nothing wrong with power word kill, but it feels kind of cheap to me. And
Yeah.
it's like your players outright dead. They don't get to make any choices. It's just there we go.
Yeah, it's
So
something completely beyond their control
yeah,
or whatever. Yeah, yeah. I will admit, like, again, it's like kind of beginner DM thing.
yeah,
I know when I started, I was about to say I fudged a lot. I didn't fudge a lot, but like I fudged more rolls than I probably should have
mm-hmm.
because, um, it. I don't know. It was more like I never fudged a dice roll when it came to like a non-combat action.
Yeah,
If they're trying to steal something or
right,
whatever,
yeah,
dice dice goes the way it goes.
right,
Because again, uh, well, I'll get back to that in a second. But like in terms of combat, yeah, sure. Like again, for the same reasons as you, is like want to avoid TPKs and all that shit.
yeah,
But like in terms of like non-combat scenarios, no, never fudged. Because as you know, the way the dice go, usually it leads to more fun.
yeah,
Like this one session, because it's also, especially failure is a good incentive for a player to kind of find another way through a situation.
yeah,
So, for instance, in one of my sessions, the players had done whatever their quest was, and they had gotten their reward. And I don't remember why I did it this way. I guess in my brain it wasn't logical for me to. In my brain, for like the mayor of the town to just have a sack of like 500 gold pieces on him, so we'll take this promissory note, go to the bank, and like they'll give you your money.
yeah,
And I didn't think anything of it. Turned out that non-quest, that reward amounted to like 3 hours of the session, because immediately the warlock is okay. I'm gonna add a 0 to the note or whatever, so they can get 5,000 gold pieces instead
right,
of 500.
yeah,
And say okay, and it's like okay, roll forgery or whatever,
yeah,
and then like I don't think forgery is a stat. Whatever I told him to roll, and so he tries it, and he rolls something middling. I forget what. And so they go to the bank, and the clerk looks at it, and he like rolled deception or whatever, and it I think it passed, and then like, but my Warforged was like a good character. He's like, you're stealing money at this point,
yeah,
and so like he goes and gets a deputy to bring him back, and then it just ends up being like a total back and forth between me pretending to be this deputy and my warlock trying to con his way out of it. And I'm having him roll deception roll after
yeah,
deception roll. He may make some of them, then he fails other ones. Like so, like when he failed, he's like, "You're full of shit" or whatever, and
yeah,
then he tries it again. It's like, okay, well, what's it going to take for you to keep quiet or whatever?
yeah.
And then he has to roll another persuasion roll. and then we just, what I thought was really fun about it is we just started doing it on paper at that point.
Yeah.
He's like, because they went outside to talk, so I didn't want any of the other players hearing this conversation. So we just started writing it down on note cards.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had just fudged dice rolls, though, I was like, none of that would have happened. It would have been way lamer. And but instead, it was awesome.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like you have to pick and choose some of those moments when you don't want to
Right.
you don't want to take away from their experience, so to speak. But
No, 100% agree.
you also don't want to, like for instance, I rolled up the loot on the loot gen for 5e for the. I know this sounds like I'm beating a dead horse here, but the Black Dragon encounter turned out to be like 78,000 gold or something like that. And the barbarian is over there doing math. He's like, well, he's googling. It's like, how much is a gold piece? And it's like my carrying capacity plus I've got this.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, no, you just can't. What are you going to put it in? I don't know.
Right.
But you kind of work and find a happy medium. I think most of the time works. You don't want to feel like you're cheating anybody, but you also don't want them to run wild with
Exactly.
everything either. Yeah, it's about
Yeah, because
balance.
like players are very much you give the mouse a cookie type players. Um, because like again, I'm not super interested in combat. Like that's sort of a lie because it got to the point where I thought about combat more than anything
Mhm.
because I knew it had to be there because it would be super. It would get dull
Mhm.
if all they did was just like talk to people. They gotta beat the shit out of some stuff every once in a while.
Right.
Um, but I never liked doing random encounter tables or anything like that. If they were going to fight something, it had to be sort of set up
Yeah.
or come out of a natural situation. But the other problem I had is I don't know about all the people you've played with, like as a DM, but um, were they all like roughly the same sort of experience level, like in terms of like their experience with D&D, not their characters per se.
Um. So for me, I don't think that there was a couple like I don't think Corey or Stamper had ever played until they played last year at my table.
Yeah,
But we all kind of, in a weird way, learned together. But it's I don't know with it's good to have varying degrees. So if I make a mistake, someone can be like, well, no, check. It's in that situation you can do this, but not in this particular one because of this reason.
right.
You know,
Yeah,
not that I'm sitting here and everyone's arguing over, well, he shouldn't have done that because he doesn't have that
right.
action,
Yeah, no rules lawyers, right?
Right, yeah.
So like what I mean is like so at my table there were 5 players. Two of them had never played before,
Hmm.
like, and two of them, and the other 3 were like veterans. Like they had played a lot of they played more than I had, a lot more than I had. And what that ended up being is like so the 2 players they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They just like Warlock sounds fun,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what they maybe they'd play World of Warcraft or something.
Right, yeah.
One liked to go on TikTok and find like really bizarre uh D&D builds. What he like so we I had them start at level 3, and what he did was he immediately multi-classed twice. So he was a cleric, a wizard, and a fighter or whatever, because
Wow.
some combination of that gives him like he did it for like this huge AC boost.
Yeah.
I can't remember the mechanics of it, but like he did it for that reason. The other one was just like she was a veteran, she knew what she was doing, but she just kind of liked the flavor of certain
Mm.
classes or whatever. And then my paladin, like he was a hardcore min maxer, so like he knew exactly how to build to get maximum damage for his level, whatever. And so what that created was a huge balance issue,
Hmm.
because like if I threw him in a combat encounter, the paladin's just going to wade through everything.
Right,
And
yeah.
if I make it so that the bard and the warlock can contribute at all, because their characters are poorly maximized or whatever.
Right.
And I didn't want to guide them too much. I was like, oh, no, you need to take this spell for this reason. I didn't want to do that. It's like you take what's interesting looking to you.
Yeah. Give them some freedom of choice and everything.
Exactly. And so every combat encounter became like a huge headache, like a good one, but like a huge headache of like, how do I make this interesting for my super overpowered paladin?
Hmm.
And how do I make it for my bard who doesn't use any of her abilities? She just likes stabbing stuff with her rapier or
Yeah.
whatever. How do I make it interesting for both of them? And I don't know how I did it, but I seem to be okay at it. But like eventually it started getting to the point where it was like, okay, these can't just be straight combat encounters. They can't just be like, here's 10 goblins or whatever. And you kill them. There had to be some sort of element attached to it too. Like for instance, one thing I did was I also love giving players choices, that have consequences. So like they go into this bar and they're dealing with this um, crime boss for whatever reason. I already can't remember. And through a critical miss earlier that my warlock had done with his Eldritch Blast, the bar was now on fire, and it was all getting ready to burn down. And they're on the second story, the crime boss is like, fuck all y'all, and he jumps through the window, and this is while a parade is going on, so he lands in the midst of all these people. They got this parade going on,
Yeah.
and it was, I remember now, it was the parade was also in honor of the party. So they jump after him, they're in the street, and the crime boss, like, he has some means, I forget how he does it. He summons like a oh, what's it called? um it's like a panther, but it has like six legs instead. I forget what it's called. But it's just like some
Yeah.
challenge rating 4 monster, and he immediately directs the monster to start killing civilians or whatever. And so then the question becomes like, okay, do they, while he's getting away, do they chase the guy down and let this creature kill everyone, or do they do what they should do? So that made the combat encounter a little more engaging than
Yeah.
just a straight fight. I think they managed to do both because the guy was already pretty weak, but still, it was a nice moral quandary that I
Yeah.
got thrown into. So yeah, the combat, oh man, it can be a real headache
It
sometimes.
really can.
It also doesn't help that I never, like I've told you before, like, I don't do set pieces, like, so everything just happens on the grid,
Yeah.
and we just throw tokens out, and okay, there's a wall here or
Yeah.
whatever, and it's always like that. But yeah, it's something else.
Yeah. For me, if I like to, if I do have a combat encounter of some sort, for there to be some sort of dialogue between the villain and the
Oh yeah.
characters and stuff like that. But it's never been like, I think only in one instance, just because Brett being the type of player that he is, like, he's just gonna try to be as sneaky and devious as he possibly can.
Yep.
Instead of like, he's just not gonna all out fight somebody.
Right.
Like he's gonna
Which
try
is the
to
way a character like
right
that should play.
exactly, and he does it so well. And like I watch everyone else, and as they're watching him go about and do his thing, and they're kind of feeding into it, you know, and then it can bring out these real good moments of either comedy or like an epic moment.
For
It's,
sure.
yeah, it's like, well, we had this huge thing happen to us, but you know, Sly Guy over here talked his way out of it, or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the most fun because like that's what you remember, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Unless you're really colorful
yeah,
with your descriptions,
yeah,
because I just like to go over the board. Like, if they kill someone, they didn't just stab them, like their eyeballs got knocked out of their skull or something.
yeah, yeah,
I try to be as gory with the
yeah,
descriptions as I
for sure.
possibly can.
Yeah, because it's a you're using steel against flesh, or whatever magic.
Right.
You know, it's it can go from Robert Englund to Freddy Krueger real fast.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I mean, man, I thank you for being on here with me, man. This has been great.
It's
Been
been a
awesome.
hoot, man.
Yeah, brother. We're going to have to do this again. Let's see if I have. Let me think of anything else if I missed out on. So, there's just one more little thing.
Go for it.
What's your advice for new DMs out there? You could give away one little token of inspiration to someone who's thinking about picking up the game but hasn't quite done it yet.
Like DMs or just any player?
Well, doesn't necessarily have to be limited to DMs. So yeah, it could be for anyone who's looking into getting to board games or like TTRPGs.
Okay, I'll answer this question 2 ways.
Okay.
For any person getting into D&D versus, and then I'll give a DM specific one because it's been pretty much a DM interview.
Oh yeah.
If you're just getting into D&D, like, what I would say is, don't treat it like a board game. Because I've played with people before, and that's kind of what they want out of it. Like, they expect it to be like, not Monopoly, but like just a board game where there are rules. You roll a dice and you do whatever the dice says. No, it's like so much more than that. It's just magical or whatever. But like, you can kind of do whatever you want with it. And some people have to, like with my two new players. which is the funny thing. I think even experienced D&D players can sort of like lose that scope of it, because I'm my super veteran paladin. Like, he sort of just treated it like a board game. He didn't really engage in the role playing elements of it all. But my two new players, once they got over that initial hurdle of like, this dice does what or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
once they got that bare minimum hurdle dealt with, they were easily my favorite players, because they just went nuts. Like, any idea that came into their brain, they made me deal with. I've had to, you know, pretend to be a milkmaid being seduced by a gnome bard or whatever. Uh, um, I've had to do with the craziest shit. Or another time, like that same bard, um, she had some drugs and she wanted to experiment on different races to see, okay, how will this drug treat a dwarf? How will this drug treat a halfling?
yeah.
And she would just buy hookers in every town and like wait until like, oh, you like being tied up, do all this shit, and
Yeah.
then immediately just make them take the drugs just to see what they would do. Um, it was just always crazy stuff like that. So like, if you're interested in getting into it, like, just kind of loosen up, have a shot before you play, and just like make of it what you want, man. Like, don't get caught up on numbers and
Yeah,
shit.
yeah,
My my DM advice is take take your inspiration from anywhere you can find it. Uh don't just take it from video games you've played, or Lord of the Rings or whatever. It doesn't have to be medieval England. Like, one of the
yeah,
most annoying things to me, when it not specifically D&D related, but like when people are talking about like fantasy stuff, like, they'll be talking about Game of Thrones and they'll be complaining about something like, well, in medieval England, the
right,
patriarchy worked this way. It's like, it's a fantasy setting. You can make it work however you want to.
yeah,
But the best ideas are just going to be ones that came from a completely unfantastic source. It could, like one idea that I really hate that I haven't gotten to use yet was, I stole it from two sources. The party had come across a wandering caravan. It was just this family. They were moving to a city, and there were bandits on them and stuff. And they had this. They had a guard with them, but like, he was like a shady dude. Turns out he wanted, the I can't remember how they got it now, but one of the kids had this doll with them, and inside the doll was this orb, and he wanted the orb. Like, he was going to kill the whole family and take the orb because, his master wanted it or whatever.
right.
And the party eventually has it. The party, as of right now, has it, but they don't know what it is. Um, so the whole orb and the doll part, I stole from a movie from the 1950s called Night of the Hunter. It's not fantasy related at all. It was just about this doll that had a bunch of money in it, and a priest was going to kill the family so he could get it.
Yeah,
And I stole from that. But what was actually in the orb was a demon. Like, it was just like this hell demon, or just this big fantastic demon, where it was just trapped in this orb.
hmm.
And where I got that idea from is, have you heard of the Demon Core? Um,
I don't
it's
think I have.
it's basically described as the most radioactive thing in existence that a human has actually touched. It's just like this radioactive isotope or whatever that scientists did experiments on after the Second World War or
Yeah.
whatever. And this one guy accidentally touched it while it was exposed, and he died.
Oh my
You know,
gosh.
days later. Yeah, because it's like, his
Yeah,
his body was completely irradiated. But just that name, Demon Core, I thought was the coolest sounding thing
yeah,
ever. It's like, I'm going to use that in something in D&D, and those two things just came together. So that would be the big thing I would say, just like, to aspiring DMs, just like, be ready to take inspiration from anywhere. It doesn't have to be another D&D book or
right.
something. And the last tidbit I would say, we could have a whole conversation about this, is use music in your games.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Absolutely use music in your games, because it will add. I can't even tell you how much it adds to the atmosphere of your
hmm,
game if you got some good tracks playing.
yeah. I asked one of my good friends. I was like, back in the day, I say back in the day, but like late 80s, early 90s, I was like, what did you all do? I was like, we had a, cassette tape, or someone would have like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves ready to go right there whenever they were doing their charges and stuff, and just have
That's
that.
awesome.
Yeah, I was like, man, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, for
You
sure. Yeah, I
know,
mean, like, yeah, you do whatever you gotta do,
yeah,
but it's so worth it.
yeah.
Just to add that, there's that smallest thing.
Hmm.
Okay, so yeah, let me phrase it that way. The four things I would think out planning out a session. I would spend a lot of time thinking about what music I was going to play.
Yeah.
Um,
Like atmosphere, like if you're in a busy market square or in
yeah,
a
yeah.
tavern or.
I had, I think 4 folders in my DM folder on my computer, and it was the music folders. It was like combat, atmosphere,
Mhm.
dread, and like town. You
Yeah.
know, those were like the big four, and there's just a bunch of tracks in there, and they don't even have to be like from obvious sources. It doesn't have to be like video games
Right.
or you can go on YouTube, generic fantasy music. Like you can be as anachronistic if you want. I've used metal tracks,
Hmm.
folk stuff. I just use whatever I feel is not too like. I mean, I wouldn't use like a techno track or whatever. That'd be a little much, but whatever you feel like you can get away with.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, also, don't use something you think other people will recognize. Like I've had my players like they'd finish combat encounter and they'd just be like, like I mean you should use like the Final Fantasy like combat victory music or whatever. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that.
Right.
Because the minute you do that, that's what they're gonna associate it with now. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna take them out of the setting.
So I remember like one of the first times that I started using music and like background tracks and stuff like it was like a generic dungeon, and I remember you might have been there at this particular one. I hadn't paid for YouTube Premium, and like 3 hours into our game, we just get a random
Yep,
insurance
I
commercial
do
pop
remember
up
that.
there.
I do remember that. Yep.
And
Yep,
then,
I've been there too,
yeah,
man. Like not necessarily
yeah,
that, but like yeah, it's something you figure out as you go. Because I've used tracks and like it really helps you understand like how long you think a session is going to go. Because like I've pulled tracks together that were like maybe a minute and a half. It's like, oh, this should work. No,
no, yeah.
that shit'll loop like 90 times before you're ready to move on.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. It's there's building an atmosphere is something that I really. That's probably what I spend the most time on. Is
Yeah,
like whenever
for
they're
sure.
whenever their character is in this particular moment, how tense or how jovial or how exciting I want those moments to be, and
Exactly.
trying to pick that out and really analyzing it, like really taking it down and picking that apart, that it can literally, music affects people in all sorts of different ways. Like if you listen to a song, it's like this song makes me feel really good, or this song makes me just want to go out and knock holes in the walls,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
People have their breakup songs and all that
Exactly.
shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, man. This has been really fun, and like I said, we'll get together here soon. We'll have us another session. Uh,
It'll be a hoot.
yeah, man. Looking forward to it, brother. But I'm
Yeah, for sure.
just gonna pause this here. And Evan, do you got any projects or anything going on? You got any future prospects as far as any games that you might want to try out or play? Anything?
Like, you
Well,
mean like other?
well, as far as a reboot on your hiatus there.
Oh, it's actually. I was talking to Brett about this the other day. It's something that's been percolating in my brain. Because I don't think my first group is going to get back together. It might be dead. But I have been talking to some coworkers, and they're kind of talking about starting a game and having me DM it. And a question that was on my brain was, okay, do I make a whole new setting? Do I use the existing one? All this stuff. And if it happens, it's not official yet. What I think I'll do is I'll leave the door open just enough for
Yeah.
that first group, but I'll just set the if the second campaign goes, I'll just put it on another continent of the same world,
Yeah.
and maybe make allusions to the other one, the main one
Mm-hmm.
from the other campaign, and just kind of link them a little bit,
Yeah.
and it would really only be in ways that would entertain me. It wouldn't matter to them
Right.
at
Yeah.
all. But that's kind of what I'm leaning on right now, and I
Set
think
up some
that would be
old
fun.
characters as like a shopkeep or something.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like, yeah, anything's possible, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it's just an idle thought right now. But
Hmm.
like, once I have to actually think about it, then
Yeah.
yeah, then sky's the limit,
Yeah.
right?
For sure, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have 3 games going on right now. Is that what you said?
Well, we haven't done the
Oh
big
yeah,
one. Yeah,
yeah,
Dragon
yeah,
Song since I think back in March was the last time we did that
yeah,
one, and then Curse of Strahd really took a hiatus over the summer,
yeah.
and then the Goblin one that's homebrew. That's really just utter nonsense. It's just I'm going to the wackiest places in my mind for all
It's
this.
just it's just dicking around.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's incredible. Uh,
That's awesome.
yeah, just having them put in these terrible situations where they're just these chaotic. They're not necessarily hobos or murder hobos, but they have the greatest potential to just be as devious as possible, and I'm just letting them embrace that. And the past uh, couple, well, I think we've only done one session of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
has been pretty fruitful. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that myself.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That'll be exciting. Yeah.
yeah,
Sometimes you just got to kind of like step away from like all the serious shit you're trying to do, and just like you just got to cut loose.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Get the lead out, as it were.
Uh-huh. Like they just letting them like anything that they wanted to do on their other characters. I'm like, well, you don't necessarily
Right.
have to do that. Like, when you see a beggar on the street, what are you gonna do? It's like, stab him.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
GTA,
Yeah,
D&D edition.
exactly. In a nutshell, that's really what it boils down to. It's like, what do
That's
you have
hilarious.
against that guy? It's like, I'm just gonna kill him. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
This is good.
It's just like, don't worry about it.
Don't
Don't
worry about
worry
it.
about
Don't worry
it.
about it. Eyes down. Just listen. It's fine.
Yeah. Like, I mean, we'll still be friends after this, but I just don't understand right
Yeah.
now.
It's like it's not in my capacity to understand what you're currently demonstrating right now, but we'll roll
Right.
with it. We'll roll with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you once again for being here, and
Hey, it's been a hoot. I've enjoyed
yeah,
it.
yeah. I look forward to doing it again, man. I'm just gonna
Oh, for sure.
yeah. I'm just gonna
All
stop
right.
this here.